Chapter 2. Balin and Balan. In Caerleon, King Arthur remained for many months, gathering his followers from all parts of the country, and preparing them for the great battles that were to come when they should go over all the Isle of Britain, and across the sea into Armorica, which we now call Brittany, to punish the cruel and wicked and drive out or bring to order the heathen Saxons. And while he was still preparing for the war, King Ryan of North Wales, one of the proudest and cruelest of all the enemies of Logres, sent a message to King Arthur, and this was the message: that Ryan had conquered 11 lesser kings and cut off their beards to make a border to his royal mantle, and he would spare King Arthur on the condition that he sent his beard to make the 12th on the mantle, as a token that Ryan should be his overlord and his master. Otherwise, he would enter Arthur's lands to burn and slay until he had by force not only Arthur's beard, but his head also. This is the most shameful and unrighteous message that ever I received, said King Arthur to the messengers. Go back to Ryan the savage. Tell him I will come against him with all my knights and fight until his head is smitten off, unless he comes to do me homage. For I owe him none, who am by right the king of all Britain, and by divine will the maker of the realm of Logres, in which realm there is no place for such a monster as this Ryan. The messengers went away, and before long news came that King Ryan was gathering together an army, and that bands of his wicked followers were already ravaging the lands of Arthur's true subjects, burning and slaying wherever they came. But there were other powers of evil warring against Logres, powers of magic harder to guard against and to overcome than King Ryan or the Saxons. As Arthur held court with his knights in the castle of Caerleon, there came one day a damsel bearing a message to him. And when she had delivered the message, she let the cloak fall from her shoulders, and all could see that a great sword was fastened to her side. Wherefore do you wear that sword, lady? Asked Arthur. Such an instrument of war does not suit a fair damsel such as you. Now that you have asked me, replied the damsel, I may tell you. This sword I bear with me is a token of my sorrow. I may not be free from it until I find a knight, a passing good man in deed and thought, without wickedness or treachery or evil thinking, who is able to draw from it the scabbard. I have been to the court of King Ryan, where I was told there were good knights, but none might achieve the sword. A great marvel indeed, said Arthur. Yet not so strange among the followers of Ryan. But now let one of my knights set his hand to the hilt of it. Then a brave knight took hold of the sword and pulled eagerly, but he could not draw it. There is no need to pull half so hard, said the damsel. In the right man's hand it will come out at a touch. But he must be a gentle knight, well born, and without evil in his heart. One after another the knights tried to draw the sword, but in turn each of them failed. Alas, sobbed the damsel, I had thought that in the court of King Arthur I would have found one man true enough to draw forth my sword. By my faith, said Arthur, half angered at her words, here are knights as good as any in the world, but they are not fated to help you, which troubles me sorely. But it happened that a young knight named Balin, whom no one thought much of, for he had lately been imprisoned for killing a cousin of King Arthur's, came into the hall while all this was going on. Fair damsel, he said presently, I pray you, of your kindness, let me try also to draw the sword. I am but a poor knight of Northumberland, but strong and passionate, and maybe these humble garments hide a better man than they seem. You speak wisely, said the damsel, therefore try your fortune also. Then Balin took the sword by the girdle and sheath and drew it out easily, and when he looked upon the keen shining blade, he loved it so much that it seemed worth more than the most precious thing in the world. Many of the knights murmured, being jealous of Balin, but the damsel said, Certainly this is a passing good knight, the best in all this land, and many great and wondrous deeds shall he do. But now, kind and courteous sir, I beg you to give me back my sword. Not so, answered Balin. With this sword I shall never part. You are not wise to keep it, said the damsel, for with it you shall slay the best friend that you have, and the man you love best in the world. and that sword shall be your own destruction. It is a magic weapon which the Lady of the Isle of Avalon gave to me." "I will take my chances of what may come," replied Balin, "but this sword I will not give up." Then the damsel made many lamentations and departed from the court in sorrow, and while Balin stood to one side looking at his sword and rejoicing in it, and as the other knights crowded together talking of what had happened, the Lady of the Lake came suddenly into the hall and stood before King Arthur. "Sire," she cried, "I hold you to your word. When I gave you your own sword, you promised to grant me a gift." "That is true," said Arthur. "Therefore ask what you will, and you shall have it if it's in my power to give." "Well," said the Lady of the Lake, "give me the head of this knight who but now drew the sword which the damsel brought. I had rather you had cut off her head, but it is too late for that." "Truly," answered King Arthur, troubled and surprised at her words, "I cannot in honor grant you the life of either of them. Sir Balin is my guest." "I will take nothing else," cried the Lady of the Lake. Now when Balin heard this, a madness seemed to come over him. "Evil woman," he cried, "you would have my head, would you? Rather, you shall now lose your own." And there and then, in the presence of King Arthur, he sprang forward and cut off her head at a single stroke. "Alas, for shame!" said King Arthur, while all his knights murmured in reproach and disgust. "Why have you done this? You have disgraced me and all my court, for this damsel came to visit me, and was a lady of high worth. Therefore I will never forgive you for this deed." "Sire," answered Balin, "be not displeased with me, for this lady was the falsest living thing, who had brought many brave men to their death, and women also." "Whatever the cause," said Arthur, you have done a wicked and shameful thing. Go now from my court, and from the realm of Logres, for you are no true knight unless you may redeem your honor by some brave deed or long penance." Balin went with speed, mounted his horse, and rode out of Caerleon. Beyond the gate he commanded his squire to leave him. "Go home to Northumberland," he said, "and tell them what has chanced. I myself shall ride in search of King Ryan and slay him, or die in the attempt, for if I slay Ryan, then surely King Arthur will be my friend again." But in King Arthur's court there was great wrath and uproar, and in the midst of it a proud knight of Ireland, Sir Launcelot, who was jealous of Balin for winning the sword, asked leave of King Arthur to ride after him and seek vengeance for the ill deed which had been done. "Do your best," said Arthur, "for I am much angered with Balin. I would that he might wipe out the shame that has fallen upon Logres by reason of that cowardly blow." Sir Launcelot went from court with all the haste he might, and it was not long before he overtook Balin. But meanwhile Merlin came suddenly to the king and said, "Evil has come into Logres, and greater shall follow. The damsel who brought the sword has set the seeds of great and terrible things. That sword she had by false means from the Lady of Avalon. And in that sword dwells a curse which must be borne to the end that in days a blessing may come upon Logres by that sword in the hand of Galahad, truest knight of Logres. But alas for Balin, for the curse that is upon him who would have been the bravest and best of your knights. He goes to his death, and naught can save him. Yet I will follow and see what good I may bring him." While this was happening, Sir Launcelot had come up with Balin, who was riding up into the hills of Wales. "Stay a while," he shouted as soon as he might be heard, "or I will make you stay, whether you mean to or not. The shield you carry before you shall not help you, for I am after you." "Maybe you would have done better to stay at home," said Balin, turning to meet him. "Whence come you, and for what reason?" "I am from the court of King Arthur," answered Launcelot, "and I come to punish you for the evil stroke that you struck this day in his presence." "It gives me much to have offended the best of the kings," said Balin, "but that damsel whom I slew was the wickedest in the world." "Make you ready, base knight," was all that Launcelot would reply. So the two of them fought there upon the hillside, and the end of it was that Balin smote Sir Launcelot through the body so that he fell to the ground dead. Balin stood beside him and was filled with sorrow at the death of a brave knight. But greater sorrow was to follow, for as he stood, a lovely maiden on a white horse came riding full speed up the hill. When she saw Launcelot lie bleeding on the road, she cried aloud in great sorrow, and came and flung herself on the ground beside him. "Ah, Balin," she sobbed, "a sad stroke you have stricken. You have slain two bodies with one heart, and two hearts in one body, and two souls are lost by it." Then she took up Balin's sword, which lay on the ground, and before he could stop her, flung herself upon the point of it and fell dead across the body of Sir Launcelot, whom she had loved better than life. If Balin was sad before, he was doubly sad now that he had caused the death of two such true lovers, and he would not be comforted even when his brother Balan found him there, Balan whom he loved better than any in the world. "Many sad things have indeed befallen you," said Balan, "but we must endure even the hardest adventures that God sends us." "That is so," said Balin, "and now let us ride on, for I would find and slay the wicked Ryan of North Wales, so that King Arthur may pardon me for the death of the Lady of the Lake." "I will come also," said Balan, "and put my body into adventure with you, as a brother ought to do." Deeper and deeper into the hills they went, through the thick forest and by gloomy passes, and on a sudden they met Merlin, but Merlin disguised so they did not recognize him. "Whither do you ride?" asked Merlin. "We do not tell our business to strangers," said the two knights, Balin adding, "but tell us who you are that ask it." "At this time I will not tell you," replied Merlin. "That is an evil sign," said Balin. "Surely you are no true man if you will not tell us your name." And he put his hand to his sword. "But I will tell you your name," answered Merlin quietly. "You are Balin, the knight of the sword, and this is Balan, your brother. And you go now to meet with King Ryan, but your quest will be of little use unless you are advised by me." "Ah," said Balin, bowing reverently, "you are Merlin. We will indeed be ruled by your wisdom." "Follow me," said Merlin, "and you shall do a knightly deed." But unknightly deeds have been done by the knight of the sword, yet good as well as evil shall come of them to Logres. Sir Launcelot lies dead, and with him his beloved, the Lady Columba. King Mark of Cornwall has found them, and will build a fair tomb above their bodies, and in days to come the greatest battle ever fought between two knights shall fall out just there, between Launcelot and Tristram, whom the land knows not yet, and King Mark shall find sorrow there also. But woe to you, Balin, for you shall strike the dolorous stroke. Yet for the healing of that stroke shall the Holy Grail come to Logres, and the good knight Sir Galahad shall achieve it, and thereafter shall the darkness fall once upon Logres. These things which the good enchanter told to them filled Balan and Balin with awe and wonder, and they rode on in silence until the fall of night. "Dismount now," said Merlin. "Unbridle your horses, leave them, and follow me." In the midst of a dark wood they came to a little glade filled with soft moonlight. "Abide hereby," said Merlin, "for at midnight King Ryan comes here secretly with but a few men to take by force the Lady of Vance, who is to pass this way with two knights in search of her lord." King Ryan came with 20 armed men, and Balin and Balan attacked them with such fury that many were slain and the rest fled. But King Ryan turned to fight with Balin, and after a great battle he fell wounded to the ground. "Brave knights," said Ryan, "I pray you slay me not. You may gain much by my life, but little by my death." "You speak truth," said Balin. "You shall come yet living to King Arthur." "I will lead him to Caerleon," said Merlin, "for here you must abide till the great battle is to be, when you shall do King Arthur good service." Merlin came to Caerleon as Arthur was about to march into North Wales. "I bring you your worst enemy," he said, "but he was overcome and taken by two good knights, whom you shall know at the great battle you go now to fight. It shall be before the walls of Castle Tarabeel, and there you shall conquer 12 kings." King Arthur marched onward, and the 12 kings made ready for him. King Ryan was with them no longer, but Lot of Orkney had been persuaded by evil counsel to join them, which was a sad thing, for he was a brave man and a good and noble king, and the husband of Morgause, Arthur's half-sister. All through one long day of battle of Castle Tarabeel was fought, and for long it seemed that Arthur must lose. But on a sudden 2 knights came riding out of the forest and entered the battle from behind, striking such blows and fighting so furiously that the 12 kings thought that a new army was come against them, and broke and fled. In the evening Only King Lot remained alive of the 12 kings, and only his followers fought on, for none could overcome King Lot. Then on a sudden came King Pellinore, following the questing beast across the world as his fate was. And he fought with Lot and struck him such a mighty blow with his sword that Lot fell to the ground and died, and the hosts of Orkney fled into darkness. You have won a great battle for Logres, said Merlin, but the victory belongs to the Knight of the Sword and his brother, and to the Knight of the Questing Beast. And who are these? Asked King Arthur. King Pellinore I know, but not the others. It is Balin, who drew the damsel's sword, said Merlin, and Balan, his brother. Balin you will meet once again, but Balan never. They shall die both on the same day, a sorrowful, unholy death. The tale of Balin and Balan shall be the saddest of any, for he who drew the sword is the most unfortunate of all knights. Alas, said King Arthur, that is a pity indeed, for I owe him much gratitude for his deeds this day, and I have little deserved what he has done for me. After the battle, Arthur marched on through the great forest which covered so much of Britain in those days, to make war against the Saxons in the north. And one day when they had pitched camp in the forest, and King Arthur was resting in his pavilion in an open glade nearby, he heard the sound of a horse's hoofs, and looked out, and looking out, he saw a knight ride slowly by, who sighed and lamented loudly, as if some dreadful ill had befallen him. Stay a while, fair sir, cried Arthur, and tell me wherefore you sorrow thus. You can do nothing to help me, said the knight, and he rode sadly on his way. A little while later came Balin, and knelt to King Arthur. Now by my head, said the king, you are right welcome. I may not abide, said Balin, for a sore curse is upon me, and evil will come upon those who are with me for long. But I pray you, my good lord king, give me some quest to follow, so that I may strive for the making of Logres before the evil overtakes me. It grieves me that you cannot stay to follow me, said King Arthur. But Merlin has told me of your fate, and as for a quest... But now a knight rode by, crying and lamenting some great sorrow. Wherefore I desire you to follow him, and bring him to me, that we may help him, if any help is to be found in man. Balin rode on as fast as he could, and before long the knight riding beside a damsel in the forest. Sir knight, he cried, you must turn round and come back with me to King Arthur, and tell him the cause of your sorrow. That I will not, said the knight, for it will harm me greatly, and do me no good. Sir, said Balin, I pray you make ready to obey me, for otherwise I will fight with you, and bring you by force. Will you promise me safe conduct if I come? Said the knight. There is much evil abroad in this forest, yet from black enchantment I cannot fly. Surely I will give you safety, said Balin, or else die for it. They rode back after this, the damsel waiting in the forest, until they came to the king's pavilion. But there, right in front of it, in the very presence of King Arthur, there came one invisible, and smote the knight who rode with Balin through the body with a spear. Alas, said the knight, even under your safe conduct am I slain. That was the false knight Garlon, who, by black magic, rides invisible. The evil has come upon me as I feared it would. But mount now my horse, which is faster than your own, ride back to the damsel in the forest, and follow the quest that I was on, and she will lead you till you have avenged my death. Then the knight fell dead to the ground, and in great sorrow Balin mounted his horse, and rode to the damsel, whom he told of all that had happened. Together they rode on toward the castle of Meliot, but before they reached it they overtook another knight who was returning from hunting. They rode with him on his way, but in a little came Garlon the invisible knight, and smote him as well, so that he fell down and died. For this also I shall do vengeance upon Garlon the coward and traitor, said Balin. And they came to the gateway of Castle of Meliot. Balin strode first over the drawbridge into the castle, with the damsel behind him, but as soon as he had passed under the gateway, the portcullis was let down, so that there was a grating of iron and wood between him and the damsel. Then many men ran together and took the damsel, and it seemed that to Balin that they were about to kill her. He could not break through the portcullis, but instead he ran up to the nearest stairway, and jumped 20 feet from a window into the dry moat, and fell upon the men with drawn sword. Fair knight, said the leader of them, we will not fight with you, nor would we do harm to you or the damsel. But the lady of the castle has lain sick this many a year, and the custom of the land is that all damsels who pass this way must seek to heal her, which may be done with the blood of a pure maiden of noble birth, and the maid shall not suffer therefrom. Well, said Balin, if the damsel wills it, you may take blood from her, but do her no harm, for it would not for I would not for my life that any ill shall befall her. Then they came within the castle, and the damsel gave of her blood in a silver dish, but it did not heal the lady, for only the sister of the pure knight Sir Percival could do that when in days to come she and her brother should pass that way in quest of the Holy Grail. After this, the Knight of Meliot, who was lord of the castle, made Balin and the damsel welcome to a good feast and comfortable lodgings. But as they sat at supper, but as they sat at supper, Balin heard in the next room the sound of a man groaning as if in great pain. What is that noise? He asked. But a little while ago, said the King of Meliot, I jousted at Castle Carbonek, and twice I smote down the knight of King Pell's following. Then this villain knight swore to be revenged by hurting the one I loved best, and the next day he rode invisible and smote my son, who may not now be healed of his grievous wound until I have that knight's blood, whose name I know not. I know not. Ah, said Balin, that knight is Garlon, who has slain 2 knights in the like manner. Indeed, I am now in quest of him, that I may slay him to avenge the wrong he has done to this damsel. I will tell you how to find him, cried the Knight of Meliot. King Pelles will shortly hold a great feast in Castle Carbonek, to which any knight may come, but each must bring with him his chosen damsel, and there you shall find this Garlon, your enemy and mine. The very next morning they set out, and in 15 days came to Castle Carbonek, and were welcome to the feast. But the Knight of Meliot was made to remain outside, since he had brought no lady with him. Balin was led to a fair chamber, where he was unarmed and clothed in rich robes. Now his sword was taken from him, for the custom was that no man might come armed to the feast. But Balin hid his own long dagger beneath his robe, and so came down with his damsel into the great hall, where the other knights and ladies were gathered. Presently Balin asked, Is there not a knight in this court whose name is Garlon? Over there you may see him, he was told, the knight with the cruel dark face. But indeed he is the most marvellous man now living, for he can ride invisible and slay whomsoever he will. Indeed, said Balin, so that is Garlon. And then he thought to himself, if I kill him here, where all these knights and ladies may see, I shall not escape with my life. But if I leave him now, I may never find him again, and he will do much harm if he lives. Now as he sat looking at him and wondering what to do, Garlon saw him, and coming over, struck him in the face, saying, Knight, why do you stare at me like this? For shame, eat your meat and do what you came for. It were shame indeed not to avenge this insult, and all the other ills which you have done, cried Balin, springing up. And as to what I came for, it was to do this. And as he spoke, he drew his dagger and stabbed Garlon to the heart, so that he fell down dead. Then there was a great commotion in the hall. Sir, wherefore have you slain Garlon, who is my guest? Cried King Pelles. For this evil deed surely you will be slain before you depart from the castle of Carbonek. Well, cried Balin, come and kill me if you dare. Yes, said King Pelles, no man shall do it but I, for Garlon was my knight. And as he said this, King Pelles snatched a great sword from the wall and struck fiercely at Balin, who guarded the blow from his head with the long dagger. But so mighty a stroke had King Pelles stricken that Balin's dagger flew into small pieces. When Balin found that he was weaponless, he turned and ran, seeking for a sword or a spear with which to fight, and King Pelles followed him, still in a great rage. Away went Balin out of the hall with King Pelles behind him, along stone passages, up dark spiral staircases, and through room after room of that great mysterious castle. And at last he came to a great tower far away from the part where anyone lived, or had lived for many centuries. And still up and up the tower he went, until near the top he paused at a closed door, and a great feeling of awe and fear began to creep over him. But he heard King Pelles clattering up the stone steps behind him, so he pushed open the door and sprang into the room. As Balin stepped across the threshold, a voice said to him, "Enter not into this room, for you are unworthy." But there was no one in the room. Balin looked about him and saw a table made of silver standing in an alcove under an archway of the most beautiful carved marble. The table was spread with a fair white cloth, which showed no sign of dust or age, and on it stood a great cup under a silken cloth. And it seemed to Balin that the cup was filled with light, so that he could hardly bear to look at it. He was trembling now. He did not know why, and he seemed to wish nothing so much as to kneel before that table and the cup upon it and pray for a blessing of God. But he saw above the table a strange spear, which hung point downwards, with nothing to support it, and once more he heard King Pelles behind him, stumbling over the threshold of the room. Then Balin leapt forward to seize the spear. "Sinner, touch it not!" cried the voice again. But he did not heed it, for now he seemed to wish for nothing but to turn and slay King Pelles. King Pelles stood in the doorway, and he had dropped his weapon, and all the hate had gone from him. But Balin in his madness took the spear and struck the dolorous stroke, wounding King Pelles deeply in the side. Then the castle of Carbonek shook and rocked, and all became dark, and a great wind seemed to seize Balin and whirled about him and cast him bleeding and senseless on the ground, while a terrible cry of woe rang in his ears and went echoing across the distance. 3 days Balin lay senseless among the ruins which alone remained of much of the castle, and on the 4th Merlin came and drew him out and set him upon a horse. "Sir, I would have my damsel," said Balin feebly as he came to himself again. "See," answered Merlin, "where she lies dead, and many another with her. You have struck the dolorous stroke and laid waste 3 counties. For the cup you saw was the Holy Grail, wherefrom our blessed Lord Jesus Christ drank the wine at the Last Supper. And the spear which you laid impious hands upon once pierced his side, as he hung upon the cross for all our sins. Now Pelles, the maimed king, lies wounded with a wound unhealable in the hall of Castle Carbonek, until Galahad the pure knight shall come to cure him after many years. Joseph of Arimathea, in whose tomb our Lord was laid ere he rose again, brought them to Britain and died yonder in Castle Carbonek. The spear has accomplished the evil that must fall upon Logris, but the Grail awaits the true holiness and purity wherewith Logris shall be blessed for a little while before the end. But ride on now, for your fate calls you, and my own fate draws near also." Sad at heart, Balin rode forward through the wastelands, and as he passed, people cried to him, "Ah, Balin, you have brought great sorrow upon this country. Doubt not but that vengeance shall fall upon you." At last he came out of those desolate fields and villages into deep forests and rode through them 8 days until he came to a castle upon the bank of a fair, broad river. And as he came out of the forest, he heard a hunting horn blow, the mort, which is the call blown ever at the death of a deer. "That blast," said Balin, "is blown for me, for I am the prize, and I am not yet dead." A long bridge led across the river to the castle, and as Balin drew near, a great company came riding across it to meet him, 100 maidens singing more sweetly than the plaintive nightingale, and 100 knights richly dressed riding gravely behind them. The lady of the castle came to Balin. "Sir Knight, welcome are you to my castle. Here you may rest in peace after your toils and sorrows, but first, for so the custom is, you must fight with the Knight of the River, for he is our champion who dwells upon the island in midstream, and all who enter the castle must pass him." "It is a bad custom," said Balin, "that a knight may not pass this way without doing battle with a stranger." "You need but this one battle," said the lady. "Well," answered Balin, "since I must fight, I am ready now. My horse is still fresh, though my heart is weary, and I long to sleep." Noble sir," said a knight to Balin, "I think that your shield is too small for such a battle. Use mine, I beg you." Balin thanked the knight, took his shield, and rode down towards the river, looking to his armor as he went, to see that he was well prepared for the fight. As he came to the ford of the river, a damsel leant over the side of the bridge nearby and said, "Oh, Knight Balin, why have you left your own shield? Alas, you have put yourself in greater danger yet, for by the painting on your shield you would have been known. Alas, of all knights, surely you are the most unfortunate. I am sorry that ever I came within this country, said Balin, but I may not turn back now, or all would think that I was afraid. He came to the island, and there was a knight in black armor waiting for him, with visor closed, and no coat of arms upon his shield. In silence they set their spears in rest, and rode at one another so hard that their spears were shattered, and each flung from his horse so hard that they lay insensible for a few moments. But soon they were on their feet again and fighting fiercely with their swords. First Balin smote the Black Knight with his unhappy sword, so that the blood ran down to the ground, and then he was himself smitten until he fell. As he rose to fight on, Balin saw that the bridge and the castle walls were crowded with fair knights and sweet ladies who watched there in silence while the battle was fought. To it again they went, striking great strokes that might each have killed a weaker man. On and on until much of their armor was smitten away, and each was wounded with seven cruel wounds from which the lifeblood ran down onto the grass. And at last the Black Knight sank to the ground, unable longer to stand on his feet. Balin stood leaning on his sword, but without it too he would have fallen. What knight are you? He asked hoarsely, for never till this day did I meet with one so brave, except only my brother. My name, said the Black Knight, is Balan, brother to the good knight Balin. Alas, that I had ever lived to see this day, cried Balin, and he fell to the ground in a swoon for the loss of the blood and in horror of what he had chanced. Very slowly and painfully, crawling on his hands and knees, Balan drew near to Balin, unlaced his helmet, and looked upon his face, and Balin awoke and cried, "O Balan, my brother, whom I love better than any man in the world, you have slain me, and I have slain you also, and men shall speak in sorrow of our deaths forevermore." "Alas, that ever this should be," sobbed Balan. "Had you but carried your own shield, I would have known you by the arms upon it, and had I not overcome and slain the knight who kept this island in past times, I would not now have been its keeper, armed in all black." Then the lady of the castle and her followers came to them, and Balan said, "Lady, the same mother bore us, who now die in the same hour, slain each by the other, unknowing whom we struck. Bury us, I pray you, in the same tomb, and write upon it that here lie two brothers who slew one another by mischance, so that all who pass may pray for our souls." Then Balan died, and Balin a little later, and the lady of the castle caused their tomb to be made there upon the island in the river, and she set Balan's name upon the tomb, but his brothers she did not know. When this was done, Merlin came suddenly to the place, and bade them write the name of Balin, and that he was the unhappy knight who struck the dolorous stroke. Then he took the unlucky sword which had been broken in the fight, and set a new blade in the hilt, and laughed softly as he did so. "Why do you laugh?" asked the lady of the castle. "For this cause," said Merlin. "No man shall handle this sword now, save only Launcelot and Galahad his son, and that shall be when the Knight of Logres seek for the Holy Grail. In the castle also you have a bed, but none shall lie in it without going mad, save Launcelot alone. But in the end Launcelot shall use this sword, and the bravest knight of Logres, the man he best loves in the world, shall fall beneath it, and that shall be Gawain. But soon thereafter shall come the last battle on the plain of Camlan, and the darkness shall fall once more upon Logres." Merlin left the scabbard of Balin's sword in the castle, where Galahad should find it. But the sword with the new blade he set with its point in a great stone, which he floated by magic upon the water, and no one knew whither the day would come, until on the day appointed it should come to Camelot. When all these things were done, Merlin came to King Arthur and told him of the dolorous stroke that Balin had given King Pelles, and of how Balin and Balan had fought and died upon the island in the river. "Alas," said King Arthur, "this is the greatest pity that ever I heard tell of two knights, and two such knights as these as I have ever yet known in Logres."